is surrounding coping with the pandemic and its effects on mental health. So this event is brought to you by the Changemakers Society, Slant and the BisiBeleBois. We hope that this session helps you understand mental health better and helps you tackle several day-to-day problems. Given that we're all confined in our houses and we haven't been seeing any of the people that we're used to seeing, work hasn't changed. The workload has probably gotten even worse. There's negative news everywhere, and there's a constant lingering feeling of anxiety. And this distress isn't uncommon anymore. So we decided to conduct this session, and we're hoping to normalize the conversation surrounding mental health. Over to Smriti to introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Harita. Hey everyone, I'm Smriti from CMS, and I once again welcome you all. Before introducing the panelists, I'd like to announce that the Changemakers Society, Slant and the BisiBeleBois are organizing a fundraiser for COVID relief. The fundraiser, Artists Assemble, will be happening on Sunday. Please do donate to help India fight the virus. The link is in the description. Now I'll begin the session by introducing our esteemed panelists. Tanushree Sangma is an expressive arts-based therapist and psychologist at Department of Mental Health and Behavioural Sciences, Fortis Healthcare. She uses creative arts in the therapy work with children, adolescents, and adults, and conducts life skills and mental health workshops with schools as a part of Fortis School Mental Health Program. In addition to this, she provides group-based creative arts workshops and training with the organization. She believes that during these tough times, support systems play an essential role in the quality of one's mental health and well-being. Pooja is a 22-year-old non-directive counselor. She has always had a passion for studying human behavior and hopes to bring about a change in the way mental health is talked about and taken care of. She is particularly interested and working towards understanding and improving mental health at the workplace. Besides being an advocate for mental health, she is also an artist and musician. Prerna Subhash Chandra is a final year MBBS student at Bangalore Medical College and Research Institute. She is also a final year BSc student at IGNOU. She works as the content head for Petronas Mental Health. Having had personal experience with mental illness, she is an advocate for mental health awareness and patient-focused medical care. With a passion for the brain sciences, she hopes to one day help make a change in the way mental health and mental illness are understood. Our panelists will be taking questions that are entered in the live chat, so please feel free to ask any questions that you have. Over to Harita.
Thank you for the introduction, Smriti. Let's start off the session by learning about the experiences of our panelists. First, let's start with Tanushree.
Thank you, Smriti and Harita, for having me here today. And so my experience, and I started in this field in the practice of clinical-based expressive arts and clinical-based work about 4 years back now. But when I trace back to how it all started, it starts with high school and in the secondary school time when I was drawn to psychology as a subject, right? In terms of I remember the very first page of the book in class 11th where they talked about psychology as a study of human behavior and about individual differences and how I could relate at a personal level about that with that and what was written over there. So that's that's how I was drawn to this, to psychology and this behavioral sciences personally. And ever since then, I've continued in this journey with academically, taking up bachelor's, taking up master's, and then going forward to using the creative arts medium. And I still continue to do it today. This is again one of the fields that is absolutely gratifying even for the practitioner, and also at large you do get to still make a difference with the people that you're working with. So that's my journey with and the field of mental health and the field of clinical-based psychology.
Thank you, Tanushree. That was a great journey, and it was great to understand your thought processes with psychology. Now we can move on to Pooja.
Hi. So thank you for having me here today. I think my interest with psychology began in school. I was a very quiet, introverted child. I mean, I was really into like extracurriculars and stuff, but I wouldn't really interact much with people. So it allowed me to observe people's behavior. And I think that's what propelled me to start studying psychology. I didn't get a chance to do it at the high school level. So I made it a point to put my foot down and say, I want to study psychology at the undergraduate level. And I think that was one of the best things that I've ever done with my life, because it's the kind of profession that allows you to look at the humanistic part of it, but also look at the science part of it, and work with clinical practice and use like proper experimental methods to find interventions that work for people. So it's a great mixture that you get to experience. I After graduating with a BA in psychology, I have finished a certification, a PG diploma in counseling skills, and I am now a non-directive counselor. So I usually work with teenagers, adolescents, young adults, and I usually work with like everyday issues and everyday stress. So this I think if I wasn't a counselor, this discussion would have really benefited me, definitely. I think, speaking about how the pandemic has affected people's mental health, it's just on so many levels. I think people are confined to their homes. They're not getting a chance to interact with people. We rely so much on physical touch. A lot of people are touch starved, and it's a huge taboo, especially if you look at it from a male perspective, uh, because of the gender roles that we have. It's a huge taboo to even admit that you're touch starved. So I think in a lot of ways it has affected mental health in ways that you can't even begin to understand. And I hope we can start the conversation and try and change some of that today.
That was a great introduction, Pooja. Thank you so much. Now, moving on to Prerna.
Yeah, so my approach to mental health and why I started, having an interest in all of this, is mostly due to the fact that I had a lot of struggles growing up. As a teenager, everyone has that awkward teenage phase where you don't really fit in, and I had some rough friendships with how high school kids can be, and that left a lot of that left a mark on me, to put it mildly. Other than that, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and as a child, this went unnoticed, and it was only after I was an adult when the doctors I was working with, they said, you probably had this your entire life, and it went under the radar, and this led me to talk about how mental health is ignored, how children especially, their mental health is largely, it goes unnoticed, and these things, when you intervene, as soon as you find out and you intervene early, this could change children's lives. So this was my own experience with mental health. I began working with Anvita Nair, the founder of Petronas Mental Health, in 2020, midway through the pandemic, when a lot of the things that was happening in the world took a really bad toll on my own mental health. I was a third-year student preparing for my USMLE, stuck at home and struggling to even get the most basic things done. I was struggling to wake up on time and, just bathe. And it would take me until 2 p.m. to just get out of bed. And that is when I started working with Petronas, and it gave me sort of a purpose. So Petronas is a mental health organization. We aim to destigmatize and humanize the various aspects of mental health, and humanize the struggles, and show people that, hey, it's okay, it's not shameful, it needn't be taboo. Everyone goes through this, and it's okay to talk about it. The way you're feeling is valid, and you can reach out for help, even if you think you're illness does not fit the clinical description, it is still valid. And the women at Petronas are wonderful. They're such strong women, and they inspire me so much. And that is why I'm here today, because they inspire me to keep doing better and to talk about this and to destigmatize it every single day. So yeah.
That was really great, Prerna. Thank you so much. Starting with our first question, I think this is something that a lot of us are struggling with given the pandemic and our erratic sleep schedules. This one is for Prerna. What is the effect of sleep on mental health?
Okay, so studies have shown that sleep is, we really don't know why people sleep, but we know for a fact that sleep is very essential for you to sort of build the necessary cognitive skills to cope with everyday things. So there is a theory that says that sleep is needed for you to have these sort of to build these sort of automated responses to stimuli that happens in everyday life. So, and it is also very essential for your brain to process everything that's happened during the day. Many people think that sleep is a passive process in the sense that it's your brain shutting down, or it happens without you having to put in an effort. But that's very wrong. The brain actually is pretty active when you go to sleep, and dreams and sleep that happens is a very important event for your body to metabolize, number one, on a physical level, and also on a mental level, very important to process. It's also very important for memories to get stored properly. Now, the problem with not having enough sleep is that you have a higher level of stress hormones that are released, like cortisols and your catecholamines and all of these things. These are associated with high anxiety states. All the people who don't sleep, we all know that they tend to intake a lot of caffeine and such. And the levels of endorphins in your brain, that is the endogenous opioids, what we call the molecules that make you feel good. The levels of these also keep dropping. So as an effect of all of this, what happens is that you sort of enter a phase which is flight or fright. And this can adversely affect mental illnesses that are already present. It can exacerbate them, and for healthy people, this can like you feeling more tired and feeling less productive. That adds up to stress, and ultimately decreases the quality of life. So having a good routine, getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night, and getting in some exercise. Exercise is, I cannot stress enough how important it is, especially when you're stuck at home, to have a good exercise routine, to eat healthy and drink enough water, at least 2 liters of water every day, and get 7 to 9 hours of sleep at the same time every day, if possible, is extremely important. This will be one of the first steps to getting your mental health on track. I can speak from experience, in 2020, how having really bad, a really non-existent sleep schedule really messed me up. I couldn't get anything done. That just made me more stressed out. So sleep is very important. I cannot stress this enough.
Thank you, Prerna. I have a follow-up to this. How do you propose that one gets proper sleep? Some people suffer from insomnia and they're not able to sleep. So what do you think are good measures to get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep?
I myself have I have very bad sleep. I have very segmented sleep. It's a form of insomnia. And some of my closest friends, they suffer with insomnia. I think it's very common in med school. The one thing that was advised to me by my own doctors, as well as every senior who's ever I've ever complained to, is sleep hygiene. Putting your phones away before you sleep, because the blue light can reduce melatonin levels in your brain. So melatonin is the hormone that tells your brain when it's time to go to sleep. So blue light negatively affects you. We all know that because of online classes or work from home, your blue light exposure is increased, right? So cutting that short, so half an hour before bedtime, cutting off all sources of blue light is very important. Read to sleep. You don't have to watch a movie to go to sleep. You can read. If you don't like reading, you can listen to a podcast or listen to an audiobook. So you can do something like that instead. And having a good wind down routine before sleep is very important in my opinion. So like doing some light yoga in bed, or stretching, or going out for a walk, spending time with your family, spending time with a furry baby if you have one, will really help you. The other thing that is very important is to tire your body out. Sometimes even if your mind isn't tired, when your body is sufficiently tired, you can maintain good sleep. And so getting in enough exercise, at least, try doing 20 hours of light exercise every day. It can help you a lot. And of course, walking before bed has shown to be one of the most effective ways you can get sleep. Of course, there are also over-the-counter medications like, melatonin supplements that can help you with sleep. But always, it's best to try with the most natural and the most sustainable methods rather than lying on medication to go to sleep. But if this is an actual problem, it's affecting your quality of life to a point where you cannot be productive. It's affecting your functioning. Like if you're falling asleep in the morning, when you're supposed to be working, if you're unable to keep a normal life going, then it's definitely worth it to talk to your primary care physician or to your psychiatrist about this, because they can help you out with this. And sometimes it might need more investigations and further exploring to get to the cause. So yeah.
Thank you, Prerna. So the next question is to Pooja. How does one cope with feeling detached and disconnected from people during the pandemic?
Okay. So I think this is like the most common thing that I've heard most of my peers tell me whenever I manage to find the motivation to call them. This is a very, very common feeling, but that doesn't mean that what you're feeling isn't valid. Just because everybody's feeling it doesn't mean you shouldn't feel like you should seek help if it's affecting you adversely. But what I have noticed that helps me is to just sometimes allow myself to feel detached and disconnected. And I mean, this is what I tell most of my counselees as well, that it's probably your brain asking for some time off. If it's getting a little too much, then yeah, there's some steps that you can take. But most of the times, just giving your brain that time off and disconnecting from everything, whether it's social media or people or anything, it helps your brain to refresh and come back. And then it's easier to motivate yourself to, keep in touch with family or friends or anyone else. So this is something that works for me on a personal level. So yeah.
If anyone has anything to add to that, you can add.
Yes, I do have something to add to that. Am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. See, a lot of times, I think with what we're feeling right now, right, because of isolation, because of being within our own spaces, it is absolutely, natural and sort of normal to feel that disconnect, right? Because we are sort of deprived of that, intimacy that one experiences, even in terms of just, a group sort of a meeting that you would have with your peers, with your friends as well. So, one thing that I've always felt that could really works is that even when, let's say, you don't get to meet in the kind of normal frequency with the people that you usually do, I think keeping yourself in touch with something which is familiar, right? It can be in the form of, let's say, your hobbies, to the things that you like to do. I think keeping that familiarity going also reduces that sense of disassociation that one could feel from others, that one could feel from oneself, or that one could feel with the environment. So I think familiarity is one thing, and also the fact that this is something that this has been a situation and a scenario that we've been in for quite a long time, right? And it is normal to feel distressed about it. And allowing, sometimes as individuals we may not be people who actually like to, let's say, be on a video call and talk to people, but we do need to allow ourselves to have that chance of doing so, because it does help. It does sort of, there are manuals nowadays that you stay connected by being virtually connected as well. So allowing yourself the chance to also experience that is necessary, and making that step that you can to sometimes remind yourself to keep in touch, reach out to people. So I think this is what I would recommend here, to work on the disconnection and disconnect that one can feel.
Thank you, Tanushree. The next question we have is a little sensitive, but so I think we will take everyone's opinion on this. As someone who has a friend going through depression and suicidal thoughts, how can I make sure I don't say anything insensitive or triggering to them? What are some dialogues to avoid? Maybe you can start with Tanushree.
Yeah. This is absolutely a very sensitive conversation to sort of touch upon, right? Also because I think because of our perspective that we do have about that one who could be experiencing this have about suicidal thoughts, or about thoughts about harming oneself, or having, at times even just having that visual of, let's say, you see something, you see a stimuli outside, and then you suddenly have that flash of thought, right, running past you. One is that, how do you deal with such a conversation, is that I think the best kind of support that we can give is just acknowledgement, and even listening, right? Without, because the person who's essentially going through this, I'm sure they would have mulled over this quite a long time, and even they would have taken a lot of courage to even speak about it, would have taken them a lot of the courage to essentially open up and speak about that. And when they do, I think for the other person who's listening, because it is also, maybe it's a conversation which is new, it can make the other person who's listening feel anxious about it. So I think as caregivers or as support system, we can try to work on, let's say, containing our own anxiety that we can feel as a result of the conversation that's coming up, right? Second is to give that support in terms of even listening, right? Knowing that they're there, validating what they're experiencing, and also being with them in this, right? Whenever we hear about this, sometimes we have that natural tendency to want to help and give a solution, right? But what's also necessary in this case is that, first, I think, acknowledge the fact, the courage that the other person took in order to express this. Second, you go as where this person is, right? Be in the same level as this person is. Wherever they're struggling, be with them in that sort of, so that the other person also doesn't feel pushed. Third is that try, sometimes our facial expressions, through our body language, our gesture, we could be saying something, but our body says something differently. So being very conscious about the way that our body language could respond, right? Because a lot of time people can be sensitive to that, like they take cues, facial cues as well as body language cues. So I think being non-judgmental, not just verbally, but also non-judgmental, body language wise as well. So this is what I would say.
Thank you, Tanushree. Now maybe we can have Pooja's opinion and then Prerna's.
I think Tanushree summarized it really well. To add on to that, I think one of the easiest ways to deal with somebody who's to sort of be there for somebody is to pay attention to what they're saying. With each person, the trigger is different, the situation is different, so you can't really generalize and like have a set of dialogues that that you can avoid, although there are some, and I'm going to get to that in a few minutes. But paying attention to what that individual person is saying, it really helps. It shows that you're listening, it makes them feel heard, and it allows them to feel like there is a sense of support for them. going to what are some of the dialogues to avoid, saying things like everybody is going through this, the entire world is in a pandemic. Most of these people know. And you saying that is not helping anybody, even yourself. When you say it out loud to somebody else, you're also putting that sort of phrase in your mind. So when eventually or if you do end up feeling low or feeling distressed, then that phrase is stuck in your mind, and then you'll feel guilty about experiencing any kind of distress. So maybe avoiding saying that everybody's going through this, so you should get over it, and uh, just don't be depressed is something that I've heard a lot of people say. When, like, for example, I say I'm depressed, they'll just say just be happy, which is not okay. So yeah, so that's some things that you can avoid. It's really common stuff, but it goes unnoticed, and like you see it without really realizing that you're saying it. So I thought I should put that out there.
Thank you, Pooja. Prerna?
So like Tanushree and Pooja said, I think one of the most important things when we are talking about something this sensitive is to just listen. Sometimes people just want to be heard and truly listen, truly listen. So be mindful of the fact that you're listening to them and listen to every single thing that they're saying, not think of a response to what they're saying, but to just truly hear them, because sometimes that's all they want. One more thing, as to things not to say, like Pooja said, telling a depressed person don't be depressed is when has that ever worked for someone? 9 out of 10 times that does not work. Also making empty promises like, hey, things will get better, things like these. When someone is at that state, telling them something like, hey, hold on, things will get better, feels exhausting. You just need to say, hey, I know you're tired. You can talk to me all you want about, how you feel right now, and I will do everything I can to help you. Another thing I would say to avoid this, especially if you haven't personally gone through something like this, is trying to empathize, because it's always good, but sometimes it can come off in a rather, oh, I know how you're feeling, and it can sort of like trivialize the experience of a person, because think about it, guys, they are at a place which is the darkest sort of place a human head can go to, okay? Because your entire body is telling you to survive, but they don't. They genuinely don't want to do that. And so telling things like, oh, I've been through this as well, and things will get better. There is a way to phrase this to be more genuine and empathetic towards the way you handle it, while not sort of trivializing the things that they are going through. Just because someone else has also gone through this does not make their experience invalid. So while talking to them, it's very important to keep that the weight of the situation in mind. And as Tanushree said, the body language talks a lot. To be open and receptive to what they're saying, and not waiting to react. Rather than, the main focus of that conversation should be to listen. And if a friend is going through this and it's because of living circumstances, and they're surrounded by people that now we're all stuck at home, and in many ways work, school and college were an exit for people to sort of have a distance from less than ideal living conditions, and you can always have offer them a place to stay. I know it's difficult during the pandemic, but sometimes that physical comfort of another person being there, even if it's in silence, helps a lot. So yeah, that is how I feel about this topic. It's very dark and sensitive. So yeah.
Thank you, panelists. So the next question is, are professional mental health therapy programs expensive? If yes, how can a student convince their skeptical parents to get professional help, especially in a situation in a country like India where mental health is still a taboo? So we can start off with Prerna, and then anyone else can take it up.
Right. This is a quite a nuanced topic to approach, because no parent wants to hear that their child is not doing okay. But I'd say approaching this topic in a more clinical way, saying, hey, I feel low, and this is not me feeling low in the sense that something is wrong with me, or it's because of things that you have failed to provide, or things that I have failed to do. It is just the way my body is reacting right now, and my body is telling me that I'm low. My body is making me feel low, because as much as we'd like to as much as we sort of conventionally separate the mind and the body, at the end of the day, it's biological processes that lead to many of the mental health illnesses that we see. So it's very important to let your get your parents to understand the fact that it's like having a broken arm. It can be with the right patient, with the right professional working on it, and it is not something that you have under your control. It's not as easy as saying, hey, stop feeling bad, your depression is going to go away. It's very important to make your parents understand that it is a lot more physical than that, in the sense that it's about levels of chemicals in your brain, or if it's something like ADHD, it's something it's how your brain is wired. It's structurally different from other people, and that is okay. And sometimes you need a little more help to function, just like someone who has tendinitis needs to see a physical therapist every now and then to be able to function well. So in my experience, talking to my parents about my problems and everything that I've been through, and having to be on meds sometimes, talking to them in this way really helped them understand it, and it helped sort of destigmatize it, because in the beginning my parents were extremely apprehensive to the fact that I was on meds and I needed regular therapy. But when I explained it to them in the sense that, hey, this is like any other disease. This is like having, say, diabetes, it's completely controllable using the right drugs and using the right methods. This is like any other physical illness. It sort of grounds it into reality and makes it not as stigmatized. So, going about it this way helps.
Thank you, Prerna. If anyone has anything to add to that, you can.
Yes, I do have pointers to add here. I think, the whole, I was just looking at the question, and this is something that a lot of people do have, question about, therapy or counseling is very expensive. And, I'm sure that, yes, we do go through a financially difficult time that makes it difficult for us to, let's say, prioritize or give time to therapy, right? It is both, I see therapy as both investment of energy and investment of time, investment of oneself as well, right? But to see therapy as expensive, it's also one it's an attitudinal aspect also, right? I think, like what Prerna just mentioned, that I think having that conversation, right, that mental health concerns needs to be given that same priority as, let's say, a physical health condition, right? And second is that it's again about it's about prioritizing the fact that, because therapy and counseling does help, right? There are actually studies about that shows about the effectiveness of even consulting, let's say, a counselor even once, right? Because again, therapy is not, or counseling is not just always about, let's say, giving a solution to a problem, right? Sometimes even people who reach out for therapy or counseling, even they find it difficult to pinpoint as to what the problem is, right? So the role of therapy and counseling is also to give that supportive stance, or even sometimes to, let's say, give a perspective, right? And that is where the effectiveness of therapy also comes in. So, yes, like what I mentioned in the beginning, that there can be financial, difficulties that one could face, but also know that there are resources that are available, right? In terms of, even nowadays, I've seen so many, therapists coming up and talking, even giving therapy sessions, even in terms of a pro bono basis, right? Or even individuals who do practice in this field for quite some time, they are willing to, I think, do the sessions even on pro bono aspect. And it's about communicating that, like if one feels that therapy is expensive, it's all right to have that notion and the thought, but it's more important to even communicate that, so that that perception and the judgment that one has also breaks. And that's, I think that's one step to also breaking the stigma around help seeking and mental health. So this is just what I wanted to add to this whole narrative around therapy, on attitudes that we have towards help seeking.
Okay, thank you, Tanushree. The next question is for both Tanushree and Pooja. Maybe you can start with Tanushree first. Can you develop mental health issues in the present from something that happened a long time in the past? Maybe an experience in childhood.
Mhm. Absolutely. Like childhood stressors, or even whether it is, let's say, childhood trauma, or even relationships that one has in with the primary attachment figures early on in childhood, experiences that one would have had, let's say, in school time, right? They weren't able to process the emotional impact of it. They can resurface in the adulthood, in the present, if you are already going through major stressor, right? Like it only sometimes requires a certain trigger or a stressor. Let's say you're grappling with stress at work, you're grappling with a conflict with a colleague, you're grappling with academic stress, you're grappling with things that are happening at home, you're grappling with the environment, right? That the environment itself is a stressful situation. These triggers can set off experiences, past negative experiences that one might have had. So yes, it is definitely possible that childhood experiences that has been, let's say, unresolved, or it has impacted you, but you haven't processed that, for that to resurface in the form of a clinical or a mental health disorder, or even just a distress that is not, doesn't have a clinical diagnosis or definition. So yeah.
Um,
Yeah, can have Pooja and then
yeah. Adding on to that, actually, sometimes, the way we talk about trauma and childhood trauma makes it seem like it has to be a very big event, or it has to be like a significant thing for it to have any effect at the time of the event, which is during childhood, or later on in when you become an adult. But even something as small as somebody in your family that you're very attached to not giving you enough emotional support, or not giving you enough emotional attention, especially when you need it while growing up, can have an adverse effect on the way you deal with relationships, or the way you deal with stress in your adult life. So everything that Tanushree said makes complete sense. But adding on to that, a trauma doesn't have to be something big. It can even be something small, like your primal emotional needs not being met, whatever those emotions are. So yeah, that's all I want to add.
thank you, Pooja. Prana, do you want to add something to this?
No, they said everything that needs to be said. They were wonderful, Tanushree and Pooja. I agree with what they have to say.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, how do I know if I have a mental health issue? We can start with Pooja.
Okay. So from a very clinical perspective, what we learn with the DSM and the ICD, which are the diagnostic criteria for mental disorders, is that a particular stressor or an issue it can be called a disorder, or like a significant mental health issue, if it is affecting your ability to function in daily life as you used to before you experienced that stressor or that particular event. So for example, if beforehand you would keep your house clean and just your daily chores or something, but something happened and now you are not able to think about anything other than how many times you've locked the door, or how many times you've cleaned the dishes. And that's the only thing that's in your mind. You're not able to think about doing anything else. You're not able to do anything else. That's when it becomes a mental health issue or a disorder. So the example I gave was with relation to OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. So the thing is, a lot of people use mental health disorders very loosely, like the terminology is very loosely, and it becomes very easy to ignore actual uh, issues when they crop up. So it's really important to like introspect and see whether like go back a couple of months or a couple of weeks and see if something has changed, and something has changed in the way you're able to function normally, like whether you're able to do your daily tasks, keep up with your appointments and your deadlines and everything. So that's uh, a simplistic way of checking whether you have a mental health issue or not.
Okay. Thank you, Pooja. If anyone has anything to add to that, you can add it.
I'd like to say that sometimes you look up all of these things online about mental health, and you see someone doing bad, I'm sick, I don't need help, but however you're feeling, even if it's a little distressed, even if you don't have a clinically diagnosable condition, if you have the means and the access to mental health resources, it's absolutely okay. And it's a wonderful thing that you get help, because even people who don't have any diagnosable condition can benefit greatly from getting therapy. It helps evaluate the way you see relationships, or how productive you can be, or the way you see yourself. It can help anybody. I think it's something that, if you have the means and you have the resources to access these things, I think it's something that everybody should go ahead and do, as a personality building sort of experience, if not for, actual clinical distress or something like that.
Thank you, Prerna. Moving on to the next question. The second wave of COVID-19 has brought some unforesighted events. The news is flooded with deaths, shortage of vaccines, beds, oxygen cylinders, and etc. It's very difficult to maintain a positive mindset when there's a lot of negativity around you. What suggestions can you propose to generate positivity in and around us? So maybe we can start with Tanushree and then move on to Pooja for this one.
Thank you, Harita, for the question. So here, I think that one psychological element of choice, right? This whole humanistic aspect of choice, that uh, choice plays a very crucial role here, right? Because number one is that, yes, I think looking at the context that we are in right now, I think everyone has been, it all started out as a transition, right? And now we've been in this particular scenario for quite a prolonged time period, and this has affected our mental health in terms of both at a micro level that we can observe and notice as individuals, and also at a very macro level, and you can actually see it in terms of how the conversations and narratives on mental health is increasing these days, even in the media platforms, even in terms of peer-based conversations, colleges taking it up, school students advocating for mental health, right? And here, how do we? And it's absolutely normal that that one could feel absolutely overwhelmed. There's always news about, let's say, about loss, about grief. There's news about there can be misinformation that can spread, and misinformation can at times really affect one's mental health, right? If a content has been very explicit, it can trigger oneself, and a lot of time any of this information that spreads around in social media especially, it's a visual medium, right? So visual mediums also tend to be a lot more explicit, a lot more visual, in the way that it tends to stay in the mind for a long time. So how do we bring about an aspect of positivity, and also I think still maintain a sense of control even when things are uncertain is to remember the choice, right? You know when you're choosing to stay at home and when you're choosing to follow COVID appropriate behavior, your individual choice is making a lot of difference because it does have an impact on the community, right? I think so that way. So your individual actions and your individual choices do make a lot of difference in other people's life, especially when it comes to COVID, right, which is so transmitted easily within the community, and where individual actions is a role to play in that as well. So your choice that you make to follow protocol around COVID appropriate behavior, that is one way that you're also helping the society. Second is that how do you maintain positivity is also that we do sometimes need to, this is where mindfulness, right, of actually, let's say, reminding ourselves consciously to take up activities, engagement that keeps our anxiety at bay, that keeps us regulated emotionally makes a lot of difference. And this is where support systems also play an essential role in creating that positivity. Sometimes yes, conversations can be about grief, can be about loss, and that can overwhelm. But at the same time, you can also communicate, right? Even within like a friend circle, when we talk about loss, when we talk about the way COVID has impacted us personally, we can also sometimes change the conversation and say that, how about today we don't talk about that, we talk about other things, what's happening in your life. We also go through other areas and other positive experiences, because it does highlight, right? Changing the course of narration also changes the way that we feel, changes the way that we perceive. So I think these are some of the ways that one can still maintain positivity even when things feel dim or things can feel very uncertain. So yeah.
Thank you, Tanushree. Pooja, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah. So adding on to what Tanushree said, the individual contribution is obviously a huge thing to take into account to make yourself feel better. I'm talking about like a very primal instinct that our brain likes to be rewarded for whatever task that we do. And the minute there is some amount of serotonin which goes into your reward channels, it becomes easier for you to deal with whatever negativity is around you, even if it's for a very short time, even if it's for just 10 minutes. So the bare minimum that we can do to help ourselves is to follow COVID protocols, and know that that's helping a lot of people by the fact that we're staying home and that we're not exposing other people, immunocompromised people. And in once you've done that, and if you have the mental space and the mental capacity to do more, if you do, you don't have to, but if you do, then even a small change, it could be anything, helping out a neighbor, anything, uh, programming your mind to derive happiness from even a small good deed, good task, whatever that you've accomplished, can also make you feel better about yourself. Like this is used a lot in like treating depression, like doing the most basic task. It doesn't even have to be about someone else. Like, okay, I'm not able to do something, or I'm feeling really low, so accomplishing a task, completing it like fully, and finishing the cycle makes you feel better. So suppose like there have been dishes piling up in your sink, finish doing the dishes, or take one task and finish it completely. And the fact, when you end up finishing it completely, your brain says, okay, good job. So there's some sort of positivity there. So yeah, that's what I had to add.
But I had a small follow-up question with that. How do you say that, a lot of people, when they feel a lot of like stress or they don't feel really good about themselves, cleaning their room helps out? How does that actually work?
I mean, that's an example that I use because it works for me, but it need not work for everybody else. It can be anything. Like if some people are interested in art or anything, like, or if you're into gaming, finishing an entire game. I mean, I don't know how gaming works. I don't game, but finishing an entire game, or just basically completing a task fully. Cleaning, it sort of helps you declutter both your physical space and your mental space. So in some way that helps. It doesn't have to be obsessively, okay, I need every surface to be disinfected kind of thing. It could just be maybe rearranging one part of your room or something like that. It doesn't have to be like disinfection kind of cleaning. Yeah.
Thank you, Pooja. The next question is for Pooja, and then we can take Prerna's opinion on the same. What practices should an individual turn to in a situation where they feel like everything and everyone is against them?
So this is like one of the most like basic symptoms or like the primal symptoms of anxiety. It's very easy, and to some extent depression. It's very easy to feel like you don't have support and you're alone in dealing with what you're dealing with. But I think the most like the easiest way to deal with that is that to remind yourself that it's a thought and your thoughts can't affect you physically. So I think one of the most important thing to do to remind yourself is that your thoughts can't hurt you. So when you're feeling, like you're alone, you reach out to someone that you can or you want to. And if that's not possible, then like Tanushree was talking about earlier in the discussion, the whole familiarity aspect, like having one thing that's familiar, whatever that task or thing could be. It could even be just cuddling with your pets if you have a pet, or something like that. A familiar thing usually helps with breaking that cycle of everybody's against me and everything in the world is going wrong. So yeah.
Thank you, Pooja. Prerna, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think reminding yourself that your thoughts are not you. You are the observer of your thoughts. So what defines you is how you choose to react to this. This is something you learn when you're in therapy, that especially people who have panic disorders, this helps a lot. This aspect of being mindful of the ways in which your head is interpreting stimuli and the thoughts that stem because of it. So having this, of course, it's a habit that needs to be developed. But once you get good at being an observer rather than a reactor to your thoughts, it helps a lot. So I would say that taking 10 minutes out of your day to practice mindfulness. I know I sound like a hippie here, guys, but sitting down and really being in the present helps you. It helps ground reality, reminds you of, it helps prioritize what you need to do. Okay. And this can help a lot. I cannot stress this enough. I think being mindful of, your internal work is as important as being present in your physical one. You always need to be cognizant of, the inner monologue that we all have and what it's trying to tell you, because once you get a hang of not reacting to it, you take negative stimuli a lot more level-headedly, if that's a word. But yeah, it's very important to remind yourself that it's temporary.
Thank you, Prerna. Moving on to the next question. What methods would you recommend to overcome lethargy and general tiredness that comes in the way of being productive? I recently found that I feel easily overwhelmed by the smallest amounts of work and don't feel motivated to do anything. So, Pooja, can you take this question?
So I think it's sort of an extension of the question that came like 2 questions ago. So some usually if this kind of feeling gets so overwhelming that you can't function on a daily basis, then it is a symptom of depression. But it need not be. It could just be like a situational thing. In which case, again, your brain likes to be rewarded and small things make you feel better. So completing a task fully usually helps. And I know I sound like a broken record, but it's a very tried and tested method in terms of like in real life as well as in research. But yeah, if Tanushree has anything to add, I mean, I'm sure she has more, relevant points to this because she works with clinical populations.
Yeah, thank you, Pooja, for that. I think there's a question which is there's a question later on which talks about the difference between laziness and depression as well. And I think adding on to what you've just mentioned right now is that these days, right, there is a lot of study that's going on screen time fatigue as well, right? And if you really look at our our lifestyle does have a role to play, like as Pooja mentioned, that if it's not let's say clinical depression, right, and if the symptoms are not as per clinical depression, then the things that can point out can be, let's say, our own lifestyle or the way that we've been going about our day-to-day activities as well. Like one is that we have been locked in, and most of our work is also work from home these days. School classes happen work from home, which also means that the amount of screen time exposure has really shot up and has gone up, right? And even most of us, like the way that we let's say relax, or the way that we take time off could be watching, let's like a sitcom, or we watch things on on platforms as well, or we stream through on online platforms as well, right? And like the engagement, most of them are happening through screen time. So the screen time and the amount of exposure that we've been having, it does have a tendency to affect us in terms of, it does tend to stress us out as well. It does tend to lead to fatigue. So the thing here is that, let's say we're not really physically active throughout, but we can be exhausted because of the exposure to screen time. And second is that even in terms of our lifestyle, because we've been doing this for quite some time, our day-to-day activities also does seem very monotonous and boredom. And boredom and monotony, these are negative experiences, and they can be very overwhelming, right? So which means that these stresses do exist to already make us feel lethargic and maybe not feel up to the mark, or not feel positive emotions, right? And so I think these are some of the factors that could definitely lead to that. And I'm sorry, I just think the question was, I've recently found that I feel as though was not motivated to do anything. So here, what I would also say is that we can look at what healthcare workers do, right? Is that uh, the whole, when we are in a prolonged period of time in the same kind of condition, in the same kind of situation, it does help to look at breaks that we take from an intermittent perspective, right? You take intermittent breaks, which means that you take more frequent breaks of shorter period of time. The reason being that it reduces the chances of, let's say, chronic fatigue over time, or being chronically stressed as well. So I think these are some of the things that one can do, is that instead of stretching oneself for quite some time in one kind of a scenario, one kind of a situation, you can take more intermittent breaks, right? And lifestyle changes, the way you go about day-to-day means, can be one of the ways of I think working around this. So yes, and if you've still worked on it from your own individual way, and it still doesn't help, maybe it could be a good call to actually talk about it even once, to just see what's going on, and take an expert opinion and a perspective look into what you've been experiencing.
Okay. Thank you, Tanushree. The next question is for Prerna and Tanushree. People perceive you as inconsiderate or offensive or lazy when you're actually struggling with ADHD. What can I do regarding that?
I'll start with this question. Yes, so my own personal experience with ADHD is that people think I'm like obnoxiously loud and all over the place and chaotic, which I am. I'll give them that. But the thing is, sometimes this is not under our control. So if it's someone who matters to you, if it's someone like your friends or your family, you can try having a conversation with them, sitting down and saying, hey, this is just how my brain works. It's very important to realize that there is nothing wrong with you. You are not too much. You are just, your brain just has an alternate state of being. It just exists in an other form, which is completely fine. You're not too much, all right? And so talking to your friends and your family and explaining to them that this is something that's not always under your control, and sometimes it just happens to you, is very important. Other than that, what I feel really helps me is that when I'm in a public situation and there are a lot of people, and I know some of them won't really understand the nuances of how mental illnesses, or I wouldn't call it a mental illness, I'd say a neurodivergencies work, is to be mindful of the way that I am behaving. I tend to go back and look inside and be like, am I really being obnoxiously loud, or something like that? And it helps me in public situations where these are people that you don't have a good relationship with. I think they're just acquaintances or something like that. But if it's your friends and family, I think that you need to talk to them. As for how to not make them perceive you as such, the thing is, you can never really control how people perceive you. What you can do is alter the way you react to that judgment, knowing that this is just an alternate state of being, and there's nothing wrong with you. You're not too much. You're not obnoxious. You're not chaotic. It really helps, and I know it takes a while to internalize it, but keep affirming it to yourself, and it helps. Being mindful of that.
Thank you, Prerna. Tanushree, can we hear your opinion on the same?
Yes, so I think Prerna's really highlighted the important points here. I think given that she's had personal experiences with this, her thoughts on this absolutely makes it very valid here, right? And I do agree with her that communication is essential, right? And also even before that, yes, it's difficult to change how other people perceive, right? I think what you're going through, right? You're going through this neurodevelopmental aspect that is coming, right? There is like a brain mechanism at work over here. It's not how you would want to be, right? I'm sure you'd also want to feel more control of your own impulses. You would also want to want to concentrate more, want to pay attention to certain things more, right? It has its own cost, it has its own benefits as well, right? So I'm sure you don't want to feel this way, right? And a lot of time it does, for the other people seeing you, they will just perceive you as the usual adjectives that they would use to describe, right? And I think one of the ways to counter this could be, how a lot these days, like how Prerna she is a mental health advocate, right? So if you're somebody who's going through this, you can also be a mental health advocate. Talk about the need for people to understand what ADHD is and what happens, that it is not also something which is within your control, right? And that by building that awareness and by other people getting that valid information can be a first step to changing their own attitude and behavior in that. So yeah.
Thank you, Tanushree. To Prerna, I have a follow-up question. If you do know someone that that has ADHD, how do you make, at least online, especially online, how do you make their workplace or any group projects or anything more inclusive and accommodating for them?
Yeah. So the thing with someone who has ADHD is that you might not always sort of understand the way they function, because if someone were to see me study, that they would not immediately understand my methods, in the sense that I'm a little bit disorganized. You know your stereotypes. Another thing with an ADHD person that you need to know is that they tend to procrastinate, but a lot of them do end up getting their work done. So giving them gentle, subtle reminders, not being too pushy, but giving them gentle reminders of, hey, this is due, just letting you know, not to stress you out, but just letting you know, just a gentle reminder. This helps a lot, because it helps them organize their day better, and keeps it at the back of their mind. And if you live with someone who has ADHD, it can get really hard, because they're known to be a little bit messy. But again, gentle reminders to them and helping them organize their day will really help them. And at least it has helped me with my personal experience. So yeah.
Thank you, Prerna. Moving on to the next question. This one is for Tanushree. How can one avoid obsessive thinking or thinking about things that lie beyond one's control?
Okay. All right. Obsessive thinking or thinking about something else, again and again, right? So there are two components to this, right? One is an intrusive nature, right? Thoughts that repeat in your mind again and again, and they can be intrusive in nature in a way that even if you don't have a diagnosable condition, right? Sometimes we do have thoughts, even sometimes coupled with images in our mind, that tends to be intrusive, so they can suddenly interfere even when you don't want to. You don't want to have these thoughts, but they can essentially keep coming in your mind again and again. So this is one feature which becomes outside of control, right? And the second obsessive sort of thinking is that we do sometimes tend to, let's say, we get triggered by something, right, that we see externally. Conversations can trigger us, and we keep thinking about that situation, right? In that way, our train of thought in that kind of scenario is, sometimes within our control, right? In terms of breaking that pattern, how do we break that pattern of spending a lot of time getting hooked to that essential thought pattern, right? So I think, how do you work on breaking that if it's still within your control and it's still not intrusive, right? That you do sometimes find yourself allowing to think about that, and it's become interfering. It's become it's become such a way that you're still in that circle. Is that what's the behavior pattern that essentially connects between the time that you find yourself getting hooked to the thought, right? And before actually doing that, is it that you go back, you think for a particular memory again, you go and you think about this conversation that you've had and the way that it's impacted you, the emotion further triggers you to think about it, and you also start making interpretations, into inferences within your own self as well, right? So first is that identify what is that which essentially propels you to keep thinking further, if it's an obsessive thinking that is still within your control, right? Second is that if you're looking at an obsessive thinking here which is intrusive and it's still outside your control, maybe it's also a time that, let's say, this can also happen because of neurochemical imbalances, and this is where maybe taking a expert opinion or expert help could really help, right? And in addition to this, these days, I think, given the fact that we are more inside within our own spaces, the chances of us being with our own thoughts, right, is also a lot more higher, right? We do allow and need to allow ourselves to have other opportunities where we are, other than engaging in this, we also find ourselves to be mindfully engaged in something else which is equally gratifying and has more positive consequence on your well-being. So I think this is maybe one of the ways that you could approach it.
Thank you, Tanushree. If Pooja or Prerna have anything to add to that?
I think Tanushree really put it together really well for a more clinical kind of perspective or a situation. Obsessive thinking or thinking about things that lie beyond one's control can also happen to somebody who's not diagnosed with clinical anxiety or clinical OCD, and sometimes the one thing, something that can really help is to just, like Prerna was mentioning, is to be an observer of your thoughts rather than a reactor to your thoughts. And also, of course, this is a very common therapy question and people get irritated when you say it, but asking yourself what's the worst that could happen, because at the end of the day they're your thoughts and they can't hurt you. So asking yourself that can, and like trying to logically answer that and come to a conclusion and trying to be as logical as possible also helps. Another thing that could really help is to sort of like word vomit sitting in one place about what's bothering you, and then sit opposite to that place and sort of talk back to your persona. This is again like a therapy technique, but it could help somebody who may not have access to therapy. So when you look at it from an outsider's perspective, it doesn't seem that scary. So yeah.
Thank you, Pooja. Prerna, do you have anything to add? Oh, you're on mute. That's okay.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'd like to add that I mean, I might be repeating myself here, but I'd like to say that whenever you're having obsessive thoughts, I found that personally what works for me is getting physically active, like going on a walk or running around in my own room, or having exercising in some form. It's always ends up breaking that chain for me. It might be because endorphins are released that sort of cut that that perpetuating cycle that happens in your brain, and it could be because of that, but I found that it really helps. So yeah.
Thank you, Prerna. So the next question here is something that we got a lot from a lot of our participants, is that how to cope with academic stress during the pandemic, especially since the level of academic work has not been reduced during the pandemic. So anyone can take this up.
I'll start because I'm still in school. It's very stressful. Let's start with that. It helps to sort of validate the problem, that it is a real problem, that we are stuck at home, and the amount of academic aid we are getting from schools and colleges in the sense of practical classes, or teaching lectures as well, because online lessons are not as effective as in-person lectures, let's be honest. But the load itself has not lessened, and so it does have to pressure. The uncertainty what happens next. Is this going to be the same way for the entire year? When will I get my clinical experience? My students are there, or when will I get my practical experience? It is very stressful. But reminding yourself that there are things outside your control right now, and the things that are outside your control right now is the pandemic. There is very little you can do about it. I know it's stressful, but it is what it is. It is outside your control. But the things that are in your control is to make the best out of the sort of cards that we've been played, right? Right now, maybe you can't get your clinical experience, but what you can do is study the relevant theory. So when the hospitals open up, you can always get it. For a science student, maybe you can work on, like your background for your research. And once the labs are opened up, you can go and do your experiments. Same for all your researchers out there. You can focus on doing your literature reviews, writing down your proposals, and maybe once the world gets back to normal, you can go about collecting your data. Working on things, sort of like differentiating between things that are under your control and things that are not under your control, and things that are under your control, only working on them, and not stressing about things that are not under your control is very important. And also validating the struggle, that it is hard. It's so hard to stay productive when you're so anxious about everything that's going on in the world. It's okay. These are exceptional times. It's okay to be not as productive as you would have been in a normal year. And it's important to remind yourself that.
Thank you, Prerna. If Tanushree or Pooja want to add something to this.
Stress with academics during the pandemic, and I feel I'm lucky, but my heart goes out to people who are studying right now. I think Prerna said it absolutely succinctly. That's the word.
I think there's just few things that I'd like to add here. Is that, like, I think taking from what Prerna has mentioned, that we do need to reevaluate our own expectations that we have. And yes, these are very unexceptional times that we're going through. And given the fact that by not doing something, we also tend to feel a lot more fatigued, right? Given that we have a lot more higher amount of screen time exposure, classes that are happening through screen time, and they're not as, let's say, enriching or stimulating as it would be if it were in physical space. So we do need to sort of reevaluate our own expectations. We do need to let's say rewire the way we would have essentially studied before. Previously, a few months back or a year back, you would have been able to, let's say, study for 2 hours at a stretch. And right now, given the current scenario, you find yourself being able to study for 40 minutes or for, let's say, an hour. And that's completely okay, right? I think as time changes, we also as individuals can adapt to the way the way we cope with things also changes over time, right? So sort of coping with that and changing the way we work. And sometimes it's about that we feel that we're not productive, and you could actually be productive. So I think find ways to sort of monitor your level of productivity in terms of, it could be, when it comes to academic, work, it can be in terms of output. So you can actually measure your output by writing down the amount of time that you've spent today, what you've actually covered, right? So keeping those things to monitor yourself so that you can, actually combat this whole feeling that I've not been productive when you're actually productive as well. So hope this helps.
Thank you. That was really insightful.
I have something to add to this, and also a question to both Pooja and Tanushree. One thing that I like to say to, as someone who's already in final year, so I've gone to, like 4 years of college in med school and all of that. And one thing that I've learned is that, to make sure you sort of separate your studying time from your, not studying time, and having a goal for the week and not doing a single word more helps, or else you will burn out. And for Tanushree and Pooja, how do you think we can, manage burnout better? Because that's something I struggle with a lot. I just can't deal with it anymore. And, it's 2 years of staying indoors, and it gets to you.
I mean, that's a really difficult question to answer, to be very honest, because at that point, I honestly don't know what I did. It just somehow panned out, which is bad. As somebody who studies psychology, I should be more observant to that. But I think what really helps is to just give yourself, if you're at a stage of burnout, it's to just give yourself, be kind, be patient with yourself, and allow yourself to take rest and to give yourself rest. It's just communicating with your peers and your supervisors or whoever, whatever deadlines you have, and letting them know that you're not doing okay and you need some time off. Usually most people oblige, and if they don't, it's not the end of the world. I know it's a very common thing that people say, but it's okay to, let go of something sometimes for your mental health. Yeah.
Thank you, Prerna, for that, for bringing up this topic on how to maintain, how to prevent burnout, right? I think one of the ways to prevent burnout is also to know that preventive measures that one can take with self-care, right? So sometimes what happens is that when we, find ourselves being, the quality of life being good, right? When we find ourselves in a position where we are feeling a lot better, we also tend to ignore our well-being at that time as well, right? So these are also the time when maybe we will not pay attention to what needs to be done to take care of oneself as well, because you're otherwise feeling okay, right? So if you're feeling okay, why do you need to do the things that you would need to do in order to prevent a burnout? But this is actually one distortion that we have, right? Is that we do need to take preventive steps to take care of oneself, even if you're feeling good, right? Even if your day is going about, or you've been going about an entire week not having a problem, right? So you do need to take that preventive step, whether it is in the form of, let's say, you've started learning something new. These days I work with anxiety, with my own personal, in terms of worry that comes in the mind, through just picked up an instrument and started learning it, and that picking up that instrument and learning is absolutely a good way to sort of de-stress, right? And so what needs to do is that you take up those preventive steps to take care of yourself, even when you are going through a good phase, right? Even when you're going through a good period in your life, when your quality of life is good as well. So that, because these are the steps that will eventually later on, let's say, prevent a burnout from happening, from a chronic fatigue from happening. Also, burnout is something which does manifest in the body, in terms of it affects the sleep. It affects the level of body fatigue, right? You sleep for long hours, you still feel very tired. So it does tend to manifest in the body. So our body do give signs in terms of it when it's tired. So you do need to listen to that and not push ourselves. If you're pushing yourself because there's a deadline, I understand that. But if you're also pushing yourself because of the worry that you've been constantly having, then maybe we do need to sort of distance ourselves and compartmentalize with our priorities and the things that are important, to give attention to. So I think this is something that could help with burnout.
Thanks, Tanushree. So the next question is, how to get to a place where validation is not important? We can start with Tanushree and then the others.
Okay, I've been thinking about this question. By the way, I find this question quite intriguing. Is that how do you reach to a point where you don't? I'll just look at the question again. How do you? Which what was the? Okay, how to get to a place where validation is not important? Okay, so first of all, validation is essential, right? Because feeling validated, especially by people that matter to you in your life, it does make one feel good, right? It does build let's say a positive sense of self as well. It does enhance one's self-esteem, especially in situations when you know that that validation has been rightfully earned as well, right? So validation, right? I think relationships that are healthy, in relationships that are healthy, you do validate the other person. It goes vice versa as well, right? So I think here what we're looking at is to not reach a point where your sense of self is determined by the validation, that one becomes dependent on seeking validation. I think that is maybe that's where the question could be coming from, is that how to stop being dependent on validation to feel good, right? And this comes by countering this whole aspect by building a healthy sense of self, right? Which is that what are the things that make you you, right? Acknowledging one's own qualities, acknowledging one's own strength as well. What are the things about yourself, the qualities about yourself that you know are good, right? And spending time actually working on them does increase that sense of positive self-esteem, right? And because there's a mastery that's involved, if you're spending time on the thing that you're already good at, you are somehow mastering that skill. You are somehow that skill building is now growing as a part of who you are. So one way to reach to a point where you're happy with the way you are, you don't have to depend on other people's validation or invalidation to let's say determine how your day go by, is also to start building and working on the positive aspects of our own self, and build on I've found skill building and being confident with one skill can really build a positive sense of self as well. So I think this is you keep working on that, and not to lose that continuity in building that positive sense of self. And please, I think it's important to essentially remember that validation does it can have a positive impact. We shouldn't just rule it out because there can be chances of being dependent on that, but it is a key aspect to building a positive sense of self as well.
I have a follow up to that. You mentioned that the validation from people close to us, friends and family, is important, but a lot of people have this tendency of having to feel validation from strangers on social media, on just being judged by the public in general, especially this, what will they think attitude of not doing things they want to do. So, how to cope with that and overcome that?
I go. Okay, I'll give the. So, uh, when it comes to validation from strangers, the internal, I think, neurobiological explanation to this can be like the dopamine kick, right? Is that even being, let's say, appreciated? Appreciation is a form of validation as well, right? Or even acknowledgement. Or in social media platforms, it can be in the form of somebody's reposted what I've done. That's you're acknowledging somebody's work in a public platform, right? That's a that's one form of validation as well. And so when we are it is in the social media self, or in an when our own self in spaces where we are interacting with strangers, right? I think it's all right to feel that. I'm so sorry, Smriti. I think I've lost the track of the question. Can you please
So my
repeat it again? Yes.
Yeah. So my question was that a lot of people don't do what they want to do because of this attitude of will I be judged, or what will people think. So
Oh,
how to overcome that?
okay, okay. So I think along with validation in this, there's a sense of breaking through your own self judgment as well, right? So to have that thought is also your own judgment about the way that you will be seen, right, on public platforms as well. And I think to not be affected by, let's say, a negative comment, to not be, I mean, number one, it's absolutely not natural for us to be affected by a comment that has been nasty or that has not been good, right? But I think sticking to the reason that you've joined social media with a purpose, right? You've joined this particular platform maybe with the purpose of bringing about a change, right? Sticking to that and knowing that sustaining that action with the grit that this will bring about a particular change, right? So what other people say shouldn't be refraining me from doing what I absolutely believe and value as well. So I think this is maybe one reorientation that one can take towards this in order to combat this.
Thank you. If there's something the others want to add to that. Okay, we'll proceed to the next question. How do we identify mental health issues in the first place? How to assess whether medical intervention is needed, or if it is just anxiety and stresses that will subside with some distractions or a cooling off activity? You can take Pooja and then Prerna.
Yeah, so I think there was a similar question before about how when to seek help. Like I mentioned before, it's usually over an extended period of time that you realize that there is some sort of disorder or a mental health issue. If it's affecting your daily life, like your ability to wake up, your ability to perform your daily tasks, your ability to go to work or study, like on a very regular basis, like in a very how do you put it? It's not allowing you to perform the most basic functions. That's when you know that it's a mental health issue. And even if it is not that serious, like they mentioned here, if it's just anxiety or stress that will subside with some distraction or cooling off activity, if it comes back, you can't predict whether it's going to come back or not. And even if it does come back or doesn't come back, seeking help from a professional usually always helps, even if it's just for one session. Most of my counselees have just come to me for one session, and they have vented out their anxieties and their stress, and they have felt better, and they haven't contacted me after that. So maybe just one session will help. Feeling like you're not being judged for what you're experiencing while you're talking about it can help. So while there are some factors and like criteria that you need to fulfill to sort of seek maybe psychiatric help, but I think counselors and therapists are very open to talking to somebody, even if it's just like a temporary thing. If you can afford to, and if you have the resources to seek professional help, please do.
Thanks, Pooja. If anyone else wants to add something to this.
Yes. Like Pooja said, even if it's just for one session or if it's just a temporary thing, talking to a therapist will help. As for when you'll need meds, like Pooja said, there are some criteria that you should meet for you to be put on meds. Supposing you are put on meds, here's the thing. It is not a lifelong sort of sentence. It's not a psychiatric medication has a very sort of bad connotation that is attached to it. And we need to, sort of normalize the fact that it's okay if you're on meds. And sometimes you need it for very short periods of time. Sometimes you might need it for a prolonged period of time. And it's okay. It's okay to be on these meds. It's like, it's like a diabetic being on, like anti-diabetic drugs. It's like, someone who has an infection being on biotics. Sometimes you need them. Sometimes, they are just chemicals that help your brain function better, and you should not feel ashamed just because you're on meds. I think that, it needs to be destigmatized.
Thank you, Prerna. So the next question is sensory overload a valid mental health issue? What can I do to combat it? We can take Tanushree and then Prerna, Pooja.
Okay. So when we're looking at sensory overload, right? Sensory, again, this comes from trigger, right? In terms of environmental, I think another word that can be used for this is overstimulation, right? And yes, there can be, let's say, pros and cons to, I mean, there can be the cons of overstimulation as well. I think whether it is in terms of exposure to screen time, whether it is in terms of, sound, in terms of, external aspects as well, right? So I think another word for this would definitely be the overstimulation aspect. And is it a mental health issue? Is that number one, there isn't a particular disorder which is in terms of, let's say, uh, called the sensory overload, right? But there are disorders which are affected by overstimulation from outside, right? Or even sensory stimulations from outside, or by situations like, for example, in PTSD, one could, sensory sounds, right, can really trigger the person because there is it can trigger flashbacks, right? So which means the person who's going through PTSD could really be easily triggered and affected by a loud sound, right? Or a flashback can be triggered, or a dissociation could be triggered just because of the sound that actually resembled trauma that they've had, right? Sensory overload, I think this is again something in terms of attention deficit or any of the neurodevelopmental aspects as well. This is where maybe being overly stimulated can also have a role to play there. So is it a mental health issue? If you're finding it difficult to manage, right? I think behavioral interventions or behavioral interventions, changes in terms of the kind of changes in the environment, the lighting, the sound, I think all of these could definitely work, help to ease that negative impact of a sensory overload. Yeah. And I think filtering really helps, like to be able to sort of filter out between what is important to what is not important. And generally, our mind does that for us, right? But if we need to, to make an extra effort, we might need to bring about some changes in our environment as well, and that could affect with that could have a positive impact on this.
Thank you. If we can proceed to the next question. This question is specifically to Prerna. You were talking about how finally getting a diagnosis helped you. Could you tell us how that process works? Who do we approach, and other details?
Without going into too many details because of privacy, I was already in psychiatric care, and the ADHD diagnosis sort of came as a byproduct of some other diagnosis that some other conditions that I was diagnosed with, and ADHD happened to be a very common comorbid condition with this. And I was talking to my therapist about how I was finding it difficult to, sort of maintain a routine. This was when I was prepping for USMLE last year, and there was a lot of workload, and it was I was finding it very difficult to cope with it. And so when I mentioned this to my therapist, and he didn't even tell me what he was doing. He just said, I have a bunch of questions, answer them. And when I did, he was like, you do have traits of ADHD. And the more I talked to him about it, the more it became very obvious that this was something that I'd always struggled with. When I was a child, I was a very disruptive child. I was the most, not wanting to put labels on it, but I was pretty disruptive, and I was very loud and a very energetic child. And teachers always told me, that calm down and sit down, and I always got into trouble. The reason my diagnosis perhaps came late was because my ADHD as a child never affected my academics. That is the sad truth today, that when a child is performing well academically, but every other part of the child's life is going bad because, if a child is emotionally not doing too good, even then, if the child is doing academically fine, many parents don't really think about the child's mental health. And this is something we need to talk about, because children's mental health goes, unseen a lot of times. So coming back to what I was talking about, the fact that, I was doing pretty well academically led to this diagnosis being, overseen for many years, 21 years of my life. And when I finally sat down and talked to a professional, they was like, yeah, you do have signs, and, working with mindfulness and building a routine would really benefit me. And that's how I got here. Yeah.
I have something to add. Similar to what Prerna was talking about, I was an overachiever in school. And for the longest time, I think I got diagnosed with depression when I was 21. And for the longest time, I thought I was fooling myself and inducing symptoms on myself because I wanted to be cool, even though nobody knew about it. Because I was struggling so much, but it wasn't coming across to other people because I was doing well academically. But actually talking to a therapist really helped, and getting that diagnosis really helped. It could be anybody. It could be somebody. So actually, to be very honest, I realized that my experiences and my symptoms could be depression while talking to a friend who was also suffering from depression. But it could be a therapist, it could be a counselor, it could be a doctor, anybody that you trust, preferably. But for the longest time, I think I've known that I was depressed since I was in high school. But because we don't talk about it, and because I was doing fine academically, it's not considered important. Like, even when I spoke to a teacher in school and said, I'm depressed and I might need help, she said, you are doing fine, you are scoring well, how does it matter? So things like that can really affect people. So if you feel like you need help, ask for it, even if it's for something trivial, even if you think it's for something trivial.
I just want to reiterate what Pooja said. Even if, your life is perfectly fine, but inside you're falling apart, you deserve help. Never think that you don't deserve help because someone else has it worse than you, because someone else's mental illness presents in a different way. It's okay. You can get help, and you deserve to get help, and you deserve to feel happy and content and fulfilled every single moment of your life. So yeah.
Thank you, Prerna and Pooja. So the next question is also very specifically to Prerna. What's your take on revenge bedtime procrastination?
Could you repeat that, please?
What's your take on revenge bedtime procrastination?
Procrastination as a whole, like that's a problem that I deal with, and I wish I had a solution, a foolproof solution to it. But what helps me is maintaining a routine, and I have like a sort of handbook where I write down things that I've done the past week, so it kind of gives me an idea of if I'm on track or not. And then this is probably a very bad coping mechanism, but I get anxious enough that I start working again. So I really I feel like I'm missing the point of the question, but yeah.
Okay, so revenge bedtime procrastination is apparently defined as people stay up through the night because they feel like they have more control over the night because they are not able to influence the events of the day. So this question pertains to that.
Oh, yes. I did not know this was a thing, and now that you say it, I just realized that this is something I do. That you feel like you can be more productive at night because you have more control over it in one sense. But like I said, having that feeling of you losing control, you need to realize that it's largely a trick that your mind is playing on you. I know it's easier said than done, but when waking up and sticking to some sort of vague routine sort of gives you that fake, not saying fake, but sort of sense of control, that something is going on in your life that is cyclical, that's rhythmic, that there is some sort of structure to all the chaos that's going around, especially in a time like this. I think that fixing a proper sleep schedule, getting that 7 to 9 hours in, and then waking up and maybe going on a jog or doing something that has some structure that repeats every day really helps. I urge the person who had this question to really try that out once, to stick to some sort of vague routine and see how that helps, and if it helps with the nighttime procrastination thing.
Thank you, Prerna. If anyone has anything to add to that. Okay, so moving on to the next question. This person asks, I'm not sure if people have really experienced this. There's this issue I face when I see someone doing something better than me, and this person thinks to themselves, why didn't I think of that? And falls into self doubt. So, what can I do about it? Maybe we can take Tanushree's take on this.
So number one, it's absolutely normal to have that, right? Like sometimes we do, we sometimes, if our personality, we are somebody who is competitive, and we have that need for high achievement as well. We do tend to, let's say, have those kind of thoughts as well, right? Which can be bordering from the aspect that we do tend to compare ourselves, and maybe that is where we do get a motivation to, let's say, work on our own self as well. Okay, so number one, to have the thought that, okay, why didn't I think of that, and that's a brilliant idea. It's absolutely okay to have that. Now the consequence of that is that it does, the negative side of this is definitely self-doubt, right? So how do you counter self-doubt is also to acknowledge one's own individual uniqueness, right? It's also to accept the fact that that yes, other individuals will have qualities, maybe qualities that one doesn't have, right? And that's okay, right? What you do is that you focus on what you have in terms of what your own qualities are, right? Your own particular strength. You take up that one particular topic that you thought that, oh, why didn't I have this idea? You might have a completely different perspective to that, and that perspective can be quite welcoming. And sometimes also if you were to sit down with this particular person in whose idea you had this response in the mind, the other person would actually also end up thinking that, oh, her idea is absolutely amazing as well. So it can happen both ways. I think it's just that our mind do sometimes tend to minimize and maximize, sometimes minimize our own personal achievements and maximize other people as well. So that's how you work on self-doubt, is that you do acknowledge what we already have, also maximize and acknowledge our own personal achievements as well. It doesn't, achievements doesn't always have to be a huge thing that's validated by everyone. An achievement can be your own personal milestone that you've had. So this would be the take on this question.
Thank you, Tanushree. The next question is how to tackle imposter syndrome. Pooja can take this.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know what imposter syndrome is, it's basically when you feel like any success you had is because of luck and not because of your talent or qualifications. And it's a very, very common thing. Like approximately 80% of the population will feel this at some point in their life. But I think one of the most important things to keep in mind if you're experiencing imposter syndrome is that you've still achieved something, and uh, validating that you have done something good, and uh, like focusing on the positive aspects of what you've accomplished rather than what you couldn't do in that one particular thing, which could also affect your your belief in your belief in your ability to perform something, helps with imposter syndrome. um yeah I think that's about it. If I have something else to add, I will, if somebody else wants to answer.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. How to deal with body image issues while fighting the standards set by society? Um, Pooja, can you take that? Okay.
This is something that I experience on a very, very regular basis. Um, I'm on the heavier side, which is not a terminology that I like using, but we're so conditioned to use. You're healthy and you're on the heavier side, and you're plump and you're chubby. Um, it used to be very, very bad throughout my teenage years and throughout my undergraduate time. Um, but something I read, I'm not saying this has to work for everybody, but I read an article about how most of our, especially for women, but also for men, and any other gender that people identify with, most of our uh, body image ideals come from social media, popular culture, and all of these are fueled by the capitalism industry, by manufacturers and all of these big corporations that work on selling a particular kind of body, and they make it seem like that's the ideal to follow, so that more of their products get sold, whether it's makeup, whether it's clothing, or skincare, or anything else. Like, for example, for the longest time I convinced myself that having straight hair was the ideal, and only recently have I started loving my curls for the way it is, whatever way it is. Like, small things like that could also affect you, and your self-esteem. So an article that I read said, every time you feel like an intrusive thought is bothering you about your body or something, asking yourself who is benefiting from this self-doubt and from this thought. And I remind myself that it's probably some multimillionaire who does not really care about teenagers and or anybody with body image issues, who is benefiting from me feeling bad about my body and harming my own mental health. And that sort of fuels me to stop thinking like that. It doesn't have to work for everybody, but I think my hate for capitalism drives me most of the time, so that's what helps. But otherwise, affirmations, and like exposing yourself to people who have body types that are not the ideal, especially on social media. Like, our social media is usually filled with like perfectly like airbrushed models, so it's very important to engage with real people on social media, so that it sort of reinstates in your mind that the model life is not the norm, and there are a lot of people who don't have those kind of bodies.
Thanks a lot, Pooja. That was very conclusive. If anyone wants to add to that.
Yeah. So growing up, right, I was on the heavier side of. I hate that term too. Growing up, I was a chubbier kid, and I lost a lot of weight in the past few years because of the various medications I was on. The one thing that sort of changed how I looked at this, was reading a lot about various feminist stories and asking myself, the way that I'm looking at my body, is this me looking at it, or me impersonating how a man would look at it? me asking myself, whose standards am I fulfilling? Is my body attractive to me because of the standards that I placed on myself, or is this something that, a heteronormative society which sells you these skinny models with long legs and pin straight hair and like faces that are like with like high cheekbones and blemishless, and I ask myself, whose standards are those? Because they sure as hell aren't mine, because I could not have known looking like that is desirable as a teenager, right? So these things are something I keep asking myself, if whose gaze am I looking at my body through, and that I found has really helped me, that performative aspect of it, that me living my life as a performance as opposed to me living it authentically, asking myself, whose gaze am I catering to, and it helps me a lot. So yeah.
Thank you, Brenda. So the last question is, how does one stay optimistic and not be anxious when someone tests positive for the coronavirus, as mental state alters breathing patterns, which might seem critical to the patient and bring the morale down. And a lot of doctors have also mentioned that having a positive attitude is better towards the recovery of a patient. So what do you suggest a COVID positive patient do in these circumstances? We can have Tanushree.
Yes. So I think I did also myself individually. I mean, was diagnosed with COVID and has recovered right now, right? So it is it is sort of difficult, right? Because I mean, it's such that it does tires you. It does. It does sort of impact one's well-being as well. And as somebody who has gotten to know about, let's say, another person being, diagnosed or having had this testing positive for that, I think one is that follow the COVID protocols, right, and guidelines, and this is how one can still protect, keep oneself safe, right, around this time in terms of following these COVID protocols. And how to keep a positive mindset around this time is that by what Harita, when she was mentioning in the beginning, right, that support systems still make a lot of difference, right? And yes, there are studies that suggest about how keeping a positive mindset through this tough time essentially does enable one to recover faster, and that is actually true. I think one is just managing that anxiety around this particular illness, right? And also knowing that when one is following these guidelines and also let's say have valid information or reliable information, I think these are some of the ways that one can contain the anxiety that one can feel with this. Also, second is that engaging with things that increase one's sense of well-being on a day-to-day aspect. I think keeping in touch with the with the support system, and if you know somebody who's going through that, and also I think while maintaining that distance, right, still staying virtually connected, talking to them, I think that can also sometimes sort of ease the person and ease you as well, as somebody, as a caregiver or somebody externally who has heard about this and is worried about it.
Thank you, Tanushree. If anyone else has anything to add to this.
Yeah. So, being in the field and such, you see a lot of people who've tested positive, and there is that air of anxiety that surrounds the diagnosis of the illness. Not to downplay the seriousness of the illness, but what one needs to realize is to, it's this acute stressor, and what you need to realize at this point is to focus on things that need to be done. Your mother is sick. What does she need right now? She needs someone who can, provide her care, timely care. And the way you can do this is by prioritizing that. And I know that it might not be the most healthy thing to be putting off, how you're feeling, and rather than dealing with it right then. But in an emergent condition like this, it is extremely important to keep calm and to prioritize what needs to be done. And one way you can do this is to keep reminding yourself, that right now this needs to be done, and only thinking about the task at hand. And another thing that really helps would be, like I said, mindfulness, sort of grounding yourself, being in the present moment and only thinking about what needs to be done at that moment will surely help with the anxiety that surrounds the illness.
Thank you, Prerna. That finishes all of our questions for this evening. This has been a great panel, and this has been a very necessary talk given the stigma in our country, and especially during this time where so many people are facing so many issues, but they don't really know that it's okay to feel this way and to be validated about their own feelings. I would just like to conclude by thanking the three of you for joining our panel and joining this discussion. And to everyone that's watching, there is a fundraiser this weekend for the COVID relief funds, and this is the first event of the fundraiser. This is what we felt was necessary to set the tone right for understanding how all of us are feeling and to feel more together as a community, even though we're all at home alone. Please consider donating. The link will be added in the description after the stream ends. Register, and I hope we can see you for the weekend shows. We have a lot of fun events lined up for you. Comedians and singers and rappers, everyone, and I really hope you show up there and donate if you can.
Big thanks to the panelists, and with this we wrap up our session for today. Thank you so much for everyone who attended this session. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me here. It was a great
Thank you
discussion.
for having us, guys.